Cask ale is the lifeblood of the British beer industry and a vital part of our country's culture. It was only a few decades ago that it was all we drank in our pubs, but in the last decade or so it's been in serious, sometimes double-digit decline. The closure of our beautiful pubs and increasingly tight margins in beer all play their part, but there's also been a drop-off in interest in cask ale, especially among younger generations. Its reputation has been damaged by cliches about who drinks it and quality issues related to how hard it is to brew well and serve right. But after 8 years of exploring the brewing world, we've come to believe that cask ale at its best is the ultimate way to enjoy beer. We've fallen in love with our traditional pubs, styles, breweries and culture and hate to see it slowly falling apart. So we've decided to do something about it. In a bid to ensure its survival, we've teamed up with Fuller's Brewery and spent the last 6 months filming stories that we hope will inspire people to get out there and drink cask ale more often. In episode 2, we're visiting one of the most beautiful and traditional family-owned breweries in the world, Hook Norton. There we meet the latest generation to talk about the importance of preserving both their and our brewing heritage. Now over 150 years old, Hook Norton still brews on its centuries-old brewhouse, open ferments in square fermenters, and delivers by horse and dray to local pubs. It's more than just a history lesson though, as we learn that sometimes the old ways really are the best. So this is Hook Norton, founded in 1849 and on this site since the early 1900s. This beautiful building behind me was designed by William Bradford, whose whole shtick was all about making industrial buildings beautiful. And as you'll find out during the tour and the brew day that we're about to experience, the inside of this building is not only more beautiful than the outside, but also possibly as beautiful as the beers they make here at Hook Norton. Let's go have a look. So we've seen the outside and now I'm going to be taking you on a tour of this amazing 5-storey, over 100-year-old brewery. We're not starting at the actual top, that's the flagpole, but you couldn't pay me to go up there. So at the moment we're up with the cold liquor tanks. So this is a gravity-fed brewery, which means the water's pumped straight up to the top and then gravity does the rest of the work. So that's what's in here, and now we're going to go down and see some amazing, historic, really beautiful equipment. So this is the mill where the grapes get crushed before they're brewed, and you can see it's like, well, it would have been right at the end of the Victorian era that this was built. It's absolutely stunning to look at. They don't make them quite like this anymore, and seeing it running was unreal. And George, who's one of the sons of the family that owns this, has been using that today for the brew they're doing as they're brewing Hooky, their flagship. Just around here though, we have another very exciting thing. One of the few historical things that's not actually in use at the moment, but hopefully one day it will be again soon. And that is the cool ship. So we associate cool ships with lambic brewing. They're really, the lambic brewers or the spontaneous brewers are the only people that really use these cool ships for their intended purpose now, which is cooling down the wort after the boil. But lots of breweries still use this traditional method as well to chill it down. There's a couple of breweries that still do it. At the moment this is out of use, but they could still use it just to chill down beer. It doesn't automatically make for sour beer. And that's what all breweries used to do centuries ago. But hopefully one day it will be filling up with beer, filling up with steam, and all the air coming in here and maybe inoculating this wort with something really exciting. So after the milling, all of that grain goes into the grist case where it will be ready to be going down into the brew house, which is on the next floor down. There's not a lot to see on this one other than this is what replaced the cool ship just through here, just a really simple little heat exchanger. Simple, beautiful in its simplicity, right? And now to the brew house. So this is the brew house. This is the mash tun, and they've got a second mash tun just behind us as well. Depending on the size of the batch they want to do or the beer that they're brewing, they'll decide which one they're going to be using. They used this one today when they were brewing Hooky when we were filming, and it was amazing to see, you know, how much manual work goes into it. Usually we're used to pressing a button or just feeding endless sacks into a grist mill and straight into the mash. Here you've got these amazing copper pipes. You're controlling the water, the cold and the hot water coming in. Somebody sat there just monitoring that throughout the entirety of the mash. So once the mash is done, obviously we need to boil, and that happens in what's often called the copper. Slightly erroneously these days, because very few of them are copper, but this one actually is. So let's go see that on the next floor down. Obviously though, before we get into the boil, you need some hops to add while you're there. So let's have a little look in the hop store. They're all there ready to be chiseled off and added to the brew. So we've got Challenger, Goldings and Fuggles, all beautiful British, brambly, fruity, earthy and spicy hops that add so much character to those lovely rich bready malts that we use in traditional British brewing. Obviously they've also got lots of modern hops as well, some American hops that go into their smaller batch stuff, but really we're here for the British hops. So just on my left as we come through, we've got the taps where they can take samples of the mash. They can check, pH, the gravity that they're hitting, the clarity of it, the colour of it before it goes into the copper, which is just through here. Watch out for the bucket, Brad. You have leaks in breweries this old. It's just bound to happen. So the wort is pumped along down to here and to this beautiful thing, this copper, which currently has loads and loads of hops in. We're so used to seeing pellets, which are really, they're really processed, they're really small. There's not, a huge amount of kind of plant matter left in them. Whereas when you're using whole cone hops, you're using those original whole flowers that have just been dried, you absolutely load the copper with hops. Just take a look at this. Now that's a lot of hops. And a lot of hops is what we like to see on the Craft Beer channel. So once the boil's over, obviously the next step is chilling it down and fermenting. And for that, we're going to head to the really exciting place here, which is the fermentation room with the amazing house strain of yeast and the open fermenters. Let's take a look. So let's stop here for a second. So these are original fermenters from when they built the brewery. So these are 120 years old. If you come around here, you'll see that they're now plastic lined, because you don't want that oak character so much in these beers, or the oxidation that can come with having essentially a slightly leaky barrel. So even though they've moved away from these circular ones and away from plastic linings, and we've got some metal linings and stuff like that now, they're still open fermenting, and open fermenting is a really interesting process. What it does is it gives loads of what's called headspace to the yeast, and when you give headspace to yeast, it often ferments in a very different way and gets loads more esters, loads of these yeasty flavours to it. So it could be banana, it could be apple, it could be a bready kind of sourdough kind of depth to it or something like that. And so, we always worried about oxidation, and we have these super sealed stainlesses, that's a word, but you can 100% just ferment in the open with a blanket of CO2 on top. And that's exactly what's happening here. So this is a hooky that's fermenting. You can see the krausen, that's the sort of the foam that the yeast produces on the top, just there fermenting away. And if you look really closely, you'll see the bubbles forming. Now, not many real ale brewers are doing this anymore. There are some risks associated. It's not the most efficient process, but it adds character to these beers. Whether you want that character or not is up to the brewer, but Hook Norton definitely want it, and it's part of what makes their beers really delicious and, importantly, really unique. So once the beer is finished fermenting, they need to rack it. Now, so much of what these guys make, and the reason that we're here, is cask ale. So what that means is there's still a little bit of fermentation to do once it's put in the casks, which is a slightly unique process, and we're going to have a look at that being done. So just while we're on the way, unbelievably, this is the original steam engine that was put in when the brewery was installed. But this used to do all the pumping, it used to do all of the heating, it was the proper engine room of this brewery, and it still can run, it still could work the brewery today. So if there's an apocalypse, we know where we're coming. The electricity's out, we're all off to Hook Norton. And down here is where they'll rack it into cask, and then it needs a couple of days either at the brewery or in the cellar where it will regain some more carbonation, get that lovely fizz to the beer and add body to the beer before it's tapped and is ready to drink and absolutely delicious. So you can see behind me the brewers are at work. This is on their micro plant where they do some experimental stuff and try out new recipes. But we're going to be heading back up to the brew house where we're going to be having a chat with George, son of the MD and a brewer here, about the history of this amazing place and the beers that they make and why they make them that way. So I'm here with George, thanks for having me. You're a direct descendant of the people who started this back in 1849, right?
Yes, so 6th generation now, been going 172 years this year. My great-great-great-grandfather, John Harris, moved from Burford, was originally a farmer in the area, so all the fields surrounding the brewery were his farmland. He then started malting his barley to add a bit of value, make a bit more money. So the shop over the road is the old maltings. Then decided, we've got 9 breweries in the village, all cottage breweries and ale houses. Why am I just selling my malt? Why don't I try and make it myself? So built the brewery on this site, knocked down his own farmhouse. And
wow, that's a risk.
Yeah, exactly. Had built the brewery, so there's no foundations to the building whatsoever. It's all on bedrock. So it's brilliant, yeah. Don't panic.
It's not like it's a low building either.
Exactly, yeah. And just went from there, really. So you've got 2 breweries here, really. You've got the old 1849 brewery, which is behind the camera, and then we're stood in the 1899 brewery.
It's an amazing thing. Like, we've been to lots of historic breweries on the channel, but I don't think we've ever been to one where so much of the original equipment is still in use. Is there a reason? Is it just it hasn't broken yet, or is there sort of something intrinsically valuable about that?
There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of the fact that we can't alter the building too much, so bringing in all this big kit would mean taking out walls or roofs and things like that. I mean, we've got some modern kit. The stainless mash tun over there was from Flowers Brewery in Cheltenham, but other than that and the big cop, we haven't really changed much. We run our gearing on electric now instead of steam, just to save on oil. Apart from that bit of electricity, there's not really too much has changed. I mean, we don't use the cool ship anymore, although we will hopefully soon. We're down to what is a small Paraflow cooler, really. But,
yeah.
Like I say, not much has changed, just because if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that you have to pick up from somebody. You can't
Right.
really read a standard operating procedure. I mean, you have to,
Yeah.
and we have to have them, and they work, but it always helps to have that feel of being taught by somebody. So you know you've probably got to open this valve a certain number of turns, or open it 5 minutes after you start running in. It's all, you're attached to your product. You know what's going on, like by learning from people instead of off of pieces of paper.
Yeah.
So it's a very nice feeling when you're that in depth into everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beers that you're brewing as well, some of them go back, you know, nearly as long as the brewery's been around.
Oh yeah.
So like looking at the recipe of Hooky, like maybe it's around the 70s that it was firmed up, but it was going for 100 years before that.
Yeah. So we obviously before then brewers use a lot more sugar and stuff, but we use 100% barley now, unless we're making something like mild, which has a bit of sugar in and stuff like that. But recipes have stayed much the same. Old Hooky obviously came in the 70s, but that's been tweaked as well. But yeah, apart from that, I mean, nowadays we're adding a lot more recipes, but the 3 core beers, which are Hooky, mild, and Old Hooky from back in the day, haven't really changed at all, to be honest.
So and those beers, those recipes, and even the yeast that's going in are older than you.
Yeah, so it's an old whitbread strain, actually, a totally mutated whitbread strain. I think we might use it with one other brewery, and that's it.
Right.
A few other brewers collect it from us for their own breweries, like Donington. But yeah, it's totally unique. It's something that we'd like to nurture and take care of that.
Yeah, and does it have lots of character that you can sort of pick up when it's in other people's beers or in your beers?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. It obviously depends how you store it, depends what style you're going for, but generally you can tell it's a Hooky beer by the yeast, yeah, definitely.
That's going in. So the tradition of what you make and what you guys do goes beyond, you know, the equipment and the methods. You've got Shire horses that are still doing deliveries. It's obviously still a family business, and lots of stuff that you do is still by hand when it doesn't necessarily need to be. Why is that so important to you to keep going?
I mean, personally, I think we owe a lot to tradition itself. I mean, it's got us this far. It can surely take us forward. I think it's also, it kind of grounds you a bit to get hands-on with the job and get stuck in, really. I mean, there's no job that anyone won't do around here. Delivering with horses, for instance, I mean, horses help build the business, really. I mean, they ship beer over most of the local area, and now Shire horse dying breed, so got to hold on to that bit of history. But yeah, it's just kind of nice to hold on to the roots, and the family being involved, I think, kind of just brings that level of attachment, and people love it. I mean, it's a village business at the end of the day. We've always tried to employ from the local area, and the village has supported us, so we'll always support the village and keep it traditional.
It's got a wonderful kind of living museum feel. Like, it would be really easy, I guess, eventually to sort of tear different bits out and put them to gather dust and look old. But they're, you know, like the horses, protecting them, preserving that species, and like these amazing bits of engineering, it's better to have them still working. That's when they're happiest and most likely to live on.
Yeah, things we found after the first lockdown, main lockdown, if you stop using stuff, it just tends to break. I mean, our gearing just didn't want to play ball, all the belts were slipping off, pumps didn't want to run, and I imagine it was much the same in the olden days with the even older kit that we don't use anymore. You just got to keep things running, otherwise they fall into disrepair and then get pushed to the back of a storeroom or something like that and degrade. And it's not nice seeing stuff that's built a business kind of go to dust and rag and ruin, really. But I think people enjoy seeing us use all this old stuff when the gearing starts up and you get that thundering sound. Yeah, it may be totally deafening and you can't talk to each other, but it's great. It's good fun.
I guess the best way to keep tradition alive is to give it a future, essentially.
Always, definitely.
Well, it's been an absolutely amazing experience. The one thing we haven't done yet today, although Brad did have a beer at breakfast, so the one thing I haven't done today is have a beer, so I think that's the next step.
So now it's time for a pint, and we're heading down to the Pear Tree Inn, and they've offered us a lift with this lovely boy. I feel like we've stepped back in time, mate. This is very, very special.
It is amazing, amazing. And I'm looking forward to first hooky of the day.
Oh, bring it on.
No feeling like the first hooky of the day.
Exactly.
When you're hand delivering it yourself. Well, we're not going to drink this. Obviously, this is to replace what we are going to drink.
Yes.
Yeah. So, we'll see you at the Pear Tree Inn.
Way! We've had, John.
It's been beautiful. We've certainly earned our pints.
Mate, Shire horses. I never thought the craft beer channel would take me to this experience.
No, it's been pretty unbelievable.
We could count the breweries on one hand in the world that are like this. It's a very special place.
Yeah, and what it imbues is like that specialness and that uniqueness in the people that work there as well. Like the brewers we were with today were, they know how to start a steam engine. Yeah. They know how to weld because they have to fix these bits of equipment where the equipment isn't made anymore. The spare parts aren't out there. They have to fix it themselves. And they're properly hands-on, not just with the equipment but with the ingredients as well. Yeah. And I think that can really help you brew amazing beer if you understand those ingredients and you completely understand how the processes and the equipment works.
Well, there's a reverence to it, isn't there? Because you are that hands-on with it. You have to intimately understand how all of that Victorian technology works. And what a testament to the technology of the Victorians that it's still going. Yeah, absolutely. And it's still making incredible and really relevant beer. Cask ale's sort of been in and out of style for decades now. And I think that
we're starting to realise, like as a culture, how important these traditions are, how brilliant these traditions are, and I really hope that continues, because a world without breweries like Hook Norton would be really sad, and cask ales really struggled. Luckily, Hook Norton, I think, are doing really well for themselves and still growing, and that's a testament to how good the beer is. But I'm always hesitant about saying like we need to rescue or save cask ale, because it can save itself, it can speak for itself. But there is a concern there, and it's really great to know that there are breweries like Hook Norton that are determined to keep those traditions, those processes, and these beautiful flavours alive.
Do you know what they call that, Johnny? They call that a classic.
They do.
You don't need to change a classic. This is all part of our shared history for our drinking culture in this nation. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that Hook Norton are keeping that alive, but they're also doing some really modern and exciting brewing in a sort of craft sense, and that's what we're going to be looking at in the next episode of this series, where we'll be visiting some breweries that are putting all kinds of modern, exciting, maybe American or maybe Belgian-inspired beers into cask to show that this wonderful sort of groundwork that Hook Norton have done and have maintained over centuries, you can build on top of that and introduce new stuff to cask. So next week is all about the future of real ale. Cheers.
Cheers.